I still remember the moment as if it were seared into my memory, a moment when every cruel sneer and dismissive laugh echoed in my ears, branding me with a label I never deserved. I stood in the crowded cafe that rainy afternoon, the dull hum of conversation doing nothing to quiet the whisper in my mind, "You're nothing without a job, a loser with no future." Those venomous words had come from Eric, my so-called friend, whose scorn for my unemployment had haunted me for months. Back then, I had been stuck in a cycle of rejection and despair, feeling invisible in a world that prized success. Yet, a few months later, life would take a dramatic turn, a twist that would see him and his gang of buddies who once mocked me mercilessly become part of my very own team. And when I finally had enough, I fired them all. I hadn't always been unemployed. I had graduated with a degree in business, but the job market had swallowed my hopes whole. I spent endless days sending out resumes, attending fruitless interviews, and watching as my peers soared ahead. Every no was punctuated by Eric's smirks and sarcastic comments at our occasional meetups. "Maybe you should consider a career in couch sitting?" He'd joke, the cruel amusement in his eyes making my blood boil. Those jibes stung deeply, they made me feel worthless, a parasite leeching off the dreams of others. I remember sitting in my tiny apartment, peeling away at the worn edges of my self-esteem, vowing that I would one day prove them all wrong. That promise was the spark that lit my determination. I began devouring every book on entrepreneurship I could find, attended seminars, and reached out to mentors in the industry. Slowly, a new plan began to form. I pooled what little savings I had, took on freelance gigs, and with a burst of creativity and sheer willpower, I launched my own startup, a digital marketing agency. In those early, uncertain days, I worked out of a cramped co-working space, fueled by nothing but determination and late-night cups of cheap coffee. Every rejection letter from investors, every setback only strengthened my resolve. I spent countless hours perfecting my pitch, drafting proposals, and even sacrificing sleep to build a business plan that would change my life. Then, as if fate itself had decided to test me once more, I received a call from a potential investor who was impressed by my unwavering spirit. He offered me a modest sum to kickstart my venture, a sum that wasn't life-changing on its own, but enough to get me off the ground. I poured every ounce of energy and passion into building the business. Slowly but surely, my agency began to gain traction. Clients trickled in at first, then more consistently, and soon I was hiring a small team to help manage the workload. It was a dream come true. The world was finally recognizing my worth. As my business started to flourish, the tables began to turn in the most unexpected way. Eric, the same man who had once mocked me for my unemployment, heard through our mutual acquaintances that I had started a company. His eyes, once alight with smug superiority, now held a glimmer of envy. Soon he approached me with an offer, at least one that I never anticipated. "Hey, I heard you're doing well," he said one afternoon, a tone of false camaraderie in his voice. "I'm looking for a job. Maybe I can work with you?" His friends, a group of scruffy guys who often hung around our old circle, echoed his request. Their arrogance was palpable. They believed my success would somehow elevate their own status. I hesitated, recalling every cutting remark they had hurled at me when I was struggling, but the business needed employees and I was short on manpower. Besides, I thought perhaps giving them a chance would show them that I wasn't the victim they thought I was. I hired Eric and his friends, Tom, Ricky, and Steve, on probationary contracts. I offered them positions in various roles. Eric as a junior salesperson, Tom handling social media, Ricky assisting with administrative tasks, and Steve in a creative role that I hoped they would fill. At first, it seemed like a stroke of poetic justice. Here they were, the very people who had once ridiculed my unemployment, now working for the company I built from the ground up. I watched them fumble through their tasks, their lack of professionalism and clumsy attempts at mimicry of corporate jargon only reinforcing what I had endured. Every mistake they made reminded me of the mocking laughter from months ago. It wasn't long before problems escalated. Eric, whose confidence had once bordered on arrogance, began taking credit for ideas that weren't his. Tom would leave his posts incomplete and even use my personal social media accounts for self-promotion. Ricky was constantly late, and Steve, who claimed to have creative insight, would deliver subpar work that undermined the quality of our campaigns. I tried to address these issues in meetings, but their dismissive attitudes and petty bickering only worsened. They ignored deadlines, disrupted client calls, and even engaged in petty arguments that spilled over into the workspace. The very people who had once belittled me were now dragging down my company with their incompetence. One evening, after a particularly disastrous client presentation, where Eric's rambling pitch left our prospective partner visibly unimpressed, I sat in my office, staring at a mountain of complaints from clients and a declining morale among the staff. I felt a surge of anger mixed with a profound sense of betrayal. These were the same voices that had once mocked my every struggle, now echoing in the quality of work they produced. I realized that I had tolerated their behavior out of a misguided sense of poetic justice, of proving them wrong. But in doing so, I had compromised the very values and standards I had worked so hard to build my company upon. That night, after closing the office, I made a decision. I would not allow these people to tarnish my hard-won success any longer. I drafted a curt email that I sent to each of them, informing them that their probationary periods were over and that their services were no longer required. I did not include any explanation, just a final, unambiguous statement that their contracts were terminated, effective immediately. I felt a cold satisfaction as I clicked send, a sense of reclaiming my dignity after all the years of being undermined by people who had once laughed at my failures. The next morning, as I sipped my coffee and checked my email, I was met with a flood of angry replies. Eric wrote back, demanding an explanation, claiming that he had been given opportunities to improve. Tom and Ricky followed suit, each letter laced with indignation and accusations of unfair treatment. Steve, usually quiet, simply wrote, "You'll regret this decision." I read each message with a steady heart, knowing that I had done what was necessary to protect the integrity of my business. Their outbursts, meant to sway my resolve, only reinforced my determination to succeed on my own terms. The fallout from that decision was swift and brutal. Word quickly spread among the industry that I had fired a group of employees, some of whom were once my harshest critics. In meetings with potential investors and clients, I was asked pointed questions about the stability of my workforce. I explained that I was committed to maintaining a team of dedicated professionals, and that unfortunately, not everyone shared the passion or work ethic required in a competitive business. To my relief, most respected my decision as a sign of strong leadership. Yet, a few old acquaintances still whispered that I had been too harsh, that I should have given them a second chance. But I knew that trust, once broken, was not something to be easily restored. In the weeks and months that followed, my company began to show signs of recovery. I hired a new team, carefully selecting individuals who not only had the necessary skills but also shared my vision and values. I restructured our operations, implementing strict quality controls and clearer communication protocols. Slowly the business began to thrive again. Clients returned, impressed by the renewed professionalism and the fresh, innovative campaigns that my new team produced. I felt a surge of pride every time I saw our success reflected in rising sales figures and positive client testimonials. Yet, amidst the professional victories, a personal ache lingered. The bitter taste of those early days, when I was mocked for my unemployment and then forced to tolerate the incompetence of those who once ridiculed me, haunted me in quiet moments. I sometimes found myself sitting alone in my office late at night, thinking about the irony of it all, how the very people who had once made me feel like a failure were now expendable cogs in a machine that I had built with blood, sweat, and tears. Their dismissal, while necessary, carried the weight of lost potential and broken relationships that I would never fully recover from. One rainy evening, as I walked home from a particularly exhausting day at the office, I recalled a conversation from years ago, a time when I was still jobless and drowning in self-doubt. A mentor had told me, "The ones who belittle you today will one day be forced to acknowledge your worth." At that moment, standing under the shelter of a bus stop, I realized that his words had come true in the most unexpected way. My success wasn't just a triumph over adversity, it was a declaration that I was more than what they had painted me to be. I was a self-made entrepreneur who had fought against all odds, and no amount of mockery could diminish that fact. As the seasons changed, my new team solidified our company's reputation. We won several local awards for innovation, and our client list expanded significantly. I found new investors, reinvesting profits back into the business to fuel further growth. Each success, however small, was a reminder that I had overcome the cruelty of my past. I learned to let go of the bitterness slowly, replacing it with a cautious optimism that the future held promise. I even began mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing my story as a testament to resilience in the face of scorn. There were moments, though, when the memories of those dark days would creep in, late nights when I'd hear a familiar mocking laugh in a crowd, or see a social media post that reminded me of the doubters who once said I'd never amount to anything. In those moments, I'd take a deep breath, recall how far I had come, and remind myself that their opinions were reflections of their own insecurities, not of my worth. I'd scribble down thoughts in my journal, sometimes tearfully, sometimes with a wry smile. It was part of my healing, a way to process the complex tapestry of emotions that the journey had woven. On a crisp winter morning, I received an unexpected phone call from Eric, a call I had anticipated with a mix of dread and resignation. His voice, once full of derision, now trembled with contrition. "I'm sorry for everything," he said haltingly. "I realize now how much I was wrong to mock you. I was foolish, and I see that you were the one working hard while we all just slithered around." His apology, though laced with regret, was a stark reminder of the person I had once been, vulnerable, eager to prove myself, and hurt by every cruel word. I listened in silence, my heart conflicted. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to let go of the past and move on. But I also knew that forgiveness was not a simple switch to flip. It was a process, one that might never fully erase the scars. I told him, "I appreciate your apology, but the damage is done. I needed to fire you and your friends because you all held me down. I hope you learn from this, but I can't undo the past." The conversation ended with a shaky, "I understand," leaving me with a bittersweet sense of closure. In the months that followed, my company continued its upward trajectory. I restructured our team, fostering an environment of accountability and creativity. I invested in professional development, ensuring that every new hire understood the value of hard work and mutual respect. Slowly, the memories of those dark days began to recede into the background, replaced by the vibrant pulse of a thriving business. Yet, every now and then I would pause to reflect on the journey, from the crushing mockery of unemployment to the triumphant, if painful, moment of firing those who once ridiculed me. It was a journey of self-discovery, resilience, and ultimately vindication. I began to understand that success is not measured by the opinions of those who doubted you, but by the strength you muster in the face of adversity. The betrayal I suffered taught me invaluable lessons about trust, ambition, and the importance of standing up for oneself. I learned that the only approval that truly matters is the one you give yourself, that every harsh word and every sneer was merely a stepping stone on the path to my own empowerment. Now, as I sit in my sunlit office overlooking a busy street, I can hardly recognize the person I once was. The scars of mockery and betrayal remain, but they have become symbols of my journey, a reminder that I overcame every obstacle, no matter how insurmountable it seemed. I built a business from nothing, nurtured it with my sweat and tears, and in doing so, I proved to myself and to the world that I am more than the sum of their insults. Every day when I review the financial reports and see the steady growth of my company, I feel a deep sense of satisfaction. I know that the struggle I once endured was real, that the isolation and ridicule were profound, and yet I emerged stronger. The story of my journey, of being mocked for my unemployment, only to rise and then fire the very people who had belittled me, serves as a constant reminder that you can turn your pain into power. I still occasionally wonder about Eric and his friends. Have they learned from their mistakes? Do they now understand the weight of their actions? I hope so. For my part, I have chosen to forgive them, not for their sake but to liberate myself from the lingering chains of resentment. Forgiveness is a slow process, and some wounds may never fully heal, but I have come to realize that holding on to anger only hinders my own progress. Looking back, I see that every moment of humiliation, every mocking comment, was part of a larger narrative that led me to discover my own strength and resilience. I learned that sometimes the most painful experiences pave the way for the most significant transformations. I learned that my worth is not defined by the opinions of others, but by my own ability to rise after every fall. Today my business is flourishing, and I've built a reputation as a determined entrepreneur who overcame adversity. I no longer feel the sting of those past insults. Instead, they fuel my drive to innovate, to lead with integrity, and to never let anyone belittle my ambitions again. I share my story with others not to boast, but to remind them that even when the odds seem insurmountable, perseverance and self-belief can lead to the most unexpected victories. I now stand as living proof that one can transform pain into purpose. My journey from being mocked for my unemployment to becoming the one who fired those who doubted me is a testament to the indomitable human spirit. And as I look toward the future, I do so with the unwavering belief that every setback carries with it the seed of a greater comeback, a lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my life.